One of the biggest misconceptions I see when agents talk about online marketing is the idea that a lead is just a lead. Someone fills out a form or requests information about a property, that's considered a lead. But if you've been in real estate for more than a couple of years, especially here in the Seattle market or in the PNW market, you know that's not how it works at all. A buyer lead and a seller lead fundamentally are different assets. They behave differently and they require different follow-up. And they convert on completely different timelines. And the marketing required to generate them is completely different. So when agents don't understand those differences, they usually end up spending money generating worst versions of both buyers and sellers. And I've already, kind of made a little comparison diagram here. But the first thing to know is that the lead cost of both are way different. Because buyers are actively searching, they're on Zillow or Redfin, Realtor.com, they're browsing listings constantly. But seller activity works way differently. They aren't browsing homes, they're evaluating decisions, which means the marketing mechanics behind each type of lead are fundamentally different. The lead cost is way different. So in most markets, buyer leads are cheaper to generate, sometimes dramatically cheaper. And a typical buyer lead through Facebook or Google might cost anywhere between $5 and $20, occasionally a little bit more depending on the targeting. And the reason they're so cheap is because buyer demand is much more visible. Buyers are actively searching. So someone might be, in Capitol Hill browsing homes in Ballard on a Tuesday night, and they might be curious about the prices or imagining just moving someday. But curiosity is what drives those clicks. And then those clicks drive lead generation, which is what every agent wants, is to get leads, but you're basically just getting people that are just browsing. So you see ads like, see homes under 900K in Bellevue or new listings in Snohomish County. But seller leads operate under a different supply demand. And there's just simply fewer sellers than there are buyers at any given moment. Homeowners aren't browsing their own home value every night, the same way buyers are just browsing listings, which means when you try to generate seller leads, you're competing for a much smaller pool of intent. So that's why seller leads cost anywhere between like $50 to $100, sometimes $200+, depending on the actual market conditions. But this is where things get interesting. So buyer leads are often curiosity driven, while seller leads are more decision based. So for their conversion behavior, buyers are just curious while sellers are actually, they make a decision in order to move forward. So and I'll go into more detail. When someone fills out a buyer lead form, something like, see homes under 800K, they're more than likely just browsing casually. They're just comparing neighborhoods. They're researching affordability, and they're just thinking about moving someday in the future. There's almost zero actual urgency attached to any behavior. So that causes a large amount of buyers to be extremely early stage. Sellers tend to signal something different. So when someone quotes like a home value, so when someone requests a home value or asks what their home might be like worth in Queen Anne or Bellevue or anywhere like that, it usually indicates some sort of life event. So relocation, downsizing, job change, relocation, there's usually an actual decision attached to it. That's why they convert faster. That leads me to my next point, is the time to close. So a big difference between buyers and sellers is just the pipeline duration. So buyer pipelines tend to stretch way more, and especially in competitive markets. It will take the usual timeline for a buyer is extended out to months. And that home search alone is what makes up the majority of buyers. And then that doesn't even include trying to get pre-approved or writing offers. Seller pipelines are usually way shorter though, because they've already decided to put their home up. The timeline can move way faster, meaning they just have to request a home evaluation and they get that listing consultation, they get that listing preparation set up, and they stage it, do everything they want, and then launch it live in the market. Now, however long it takes, that's entirely dependent on the market. Another point is just leverage. If you control the listing in a desirable neighborhood, you represent more than just the seller. You also represent the inventory as well. The inventory attracts attention. So that listing becomes marketing content, open house traffic, buyer inquiries, stuff like that, which means a single listing can generate multiple additional opportunities. But if you just represent a buyer, it usually doesn't create that same multiplier effect. So in order to actually attract the right sort of people and more serious people, whether that is on the buyer or seller side, since buyer campaigns are usually inventory based, ads like get a custom list of homes under 700K, but it's just the way you filter them out. But they also attract a lot of low intent clicks, but it's just the way you filter them out. So ads that attract sellers are just kind of home evaluations, thinking about downsizing equity, stuff like that. So they require a different angle because you're targeting a whole different market. And the idea is you want to try to attract people trying to make a decision. So are they thinking about downsizing? And the biggest reason why agents get bad leads, they just end up taking any and everybody that's coming into their system. So on the buyer side, you get very broad targeting, you get generic home search ads, you don't qualify anybody. And it's the same with sellers, but it's just like cash offers, see your free home evaluation. And this is all just good for getting data and volume, but more than likely, chances are you're not going to really see much business from just the first series of ads you run or whatever it is, flyers, anything like that. So obviously, buyer leads are easier to generate and seller leads are harder. And because of that, seller leads usually represent more leverage inside of the real estate business. So if you just understand the mechanics of how you can get both pipelines pumping, buyers and sellers, you stop chasing leads and you just start designing a marketing system that's actually built around who you want to work with. And if you want to learn more, book a time below. It'll be the first link in the description. We could actually have a conversation about how we can help you do that in the PNW.